We are now recording yet another lovely episode of the Ethically Sourced Podcast. Welcome aboard. I'm here with Rory and Kashi again. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, today we are going to follow up with last time's last time's topic of backyard breeding, and we're actually delving away from dogs this time into all other species. Because, believe it or not, dogs are not the only species that can be backyard bred.
That is very fair. I think that it's a great idea to hop into kind of these other backyard breeding and talk about that because
Right, and touch on a lot of these signs, because who knows, maybe we'll even get to a point where we can educate some people to help them avoid any backyard breeders in the future come.
yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Kind of educate and teach and kind of help people look for what they should be looking for and staying away from. And
I think collectively we know quite a bit about breeding most often bred animals.
Yeah, basically.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I dare say we do, and then we also have a few that are lesser known too.
Yeah, definitely.
So overall, let's start off. Of course, one of the big ones is Rory has been involved. Kasha, you've been involved with rats too, right? At one point, I know.
I've owned two rats. When I bred them, they were it was under direction at a pet store.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it was not the best conditions, and I didn't really want to.
Okay, so yeah, so you at least have experience on the badder side of things, and you also have enough. You have that experience that taught you that you don't like that side of things. Good to know, though. And of course, I currently do breed rats, so we'll just hop right into that.
Yeah.
So, of course, you have your usual. For any ethical breeder, you should obviously. So rats are a little different, where you can't really, do a lot of the same things as dogs. Obviously, you can't get them X-rays or health tests because, well, they don't. Either they don't exist or they're not necessarily required. It's just more.
Right.
There are health tests that do exist in rats. However, they are extremely expensive and usually not typically a required thing and not absolutely necessary. Unless, in my opinion, though, I think if someone's colony has had an issue with certain problems, which those tests exist for, then I do think maybe you should consider testing, though.
Right, and I think, if it is a concern that you have, there are, especially with things like rat bite fever being prevalent and stuff like that, if it is something that concerns you, you should test for it.
Right, and
what is rat bite fever?
So rat bite fever is a disease that comes from infected rats, not actually infected, but it's rats who carry the bacteria necessary to host the disease. And think of it a lot like cat scratch fever, except a rat version of it in a way. Yep, and it's from I forget the mortality rate, but if I recall right, I thought it was pretty fairly high.
Yeah, and it is, and it's definitely it is definitely something that I know. What was it, a year and a half ago? A lot of ratteries actually saw a spike in rat bite fever happening.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of people that were testing, and a surprising amount of decent breeders actually had positive rat bite fever tests.
Yeah, and then
so it was, the option was I believe it is, you can haul your entire breeding program.
Right.
Or you can wait it out.
Right, especially since the tough part with waiting it out is it is something that can be transmitted through the urine or mucus, too, of the rats. So it's one of those things where you have to be careful. Okay. And I know in the past couple years there had actually been a huge outbreak of SDAV, which, crap, what was that specifically called again? Let's see. Let me Google this real quick. I cannot even pronounce that.
No, and it's not just rats; it's gerbil, rat,
big thing a lot of rodents, and it was spread around by a breeder who used a unreliable transport as well.
Yep.
So SDAV actually hit rats pretty hard at one point, and from what I know of, it's still out there in certain populations enough that it is a very valid scare to worry about. Because it can wipe out entire colonies.
Yep.
I bet.
But yeah, so overall, it's one of those things where if you have the means to test and can, especially if you want to make sure things are negative and such, I absolutely would agree that it's good to test that kind of thing. I know a few people who make sure to go through Charles River laboratories to test for SDAV and a few other problematic diseases in rats. And overall, though, but getting into the more, backyard bred side of things, so, you obviously have people where if they don't test for that kind of stuff when their animals are clearly sick with something and consistently dying, then that's absolutely, a backyard breeding thing.
Right.
Another big one is transparency. I feel is really important when you're working with rats because they're still technically a fairly fresh animal to the pet trade, and while they're growing in popularity, you also have to, as a breeder, be very transparent about your rats and the problems that their line has had at some point or another, especially if it was very recent.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I very much believe that, I do think we need to also kind of look at what differs from a backyard breeder from a hobby breeder.
Yeah.
So a hobby breeder, a backyard breeder, they're going to know their animals have issues. They're going to be like, oh, it's fine, it's fine.
Right.
It's clearly not. A hobby breeder, like I am a hobby breeder, I hobby breed mice. That is kind of my thing.
Yep.
And right now, I'm very transparent with the fact that I do not, unless somebody comes to me and they're like, I am looking for females, I am looking for X.
Yep.
I don't sell right now to the outside because I am working on solidifying and making sure that my lines are stable.
Right.
And that does mean that I do a lot of calls. I do a lot of hard calls because
right. That's especially a big thing. Is calling is, you hear the word call, and a lot of people these days are gonna get so scared of it. But the problem is, you have a lot of people who compare dogs to other animals, and they don't realize that that's a very poor mindset. Because dogs are not rats, and rats are not dogs. Unlike in dogs, rats are and mice as well are far more of an animal where it's much more appropriate to call in many situations than it is to not.
Yep. Yeah. And it's if I have a mouse, I just called off a beautiful male mouse, absolutely gorgeous. I called him off because he was displaying signs that I didn't like.
Right.
And it was, as a male mouse, he was hunching up in kind of a very aggressive posture. He was all fluffed up. His fur was on end. He was rattling his tail at me. He was making aggressive noises. And I decided...
Like, ooh, yep.
And he hadn't bitten me yet.
Right, but it's like not taking that risk.
Yeah.
I have 3 sons of his that I've set aside for potential breeding projects.
Right.
And I decided that I didn't need him as a male with his shitty attitude.
Right.
Yeah.
So he went to the freezer camp and will eventually make a tasty meal for somebody.
Right. And I've definitely been through a lot of situations where I've had to call rats for a variety of reasons. Whether it just be temperamentally or, heck, a lot of my animals that I breed now, my rats, some of them are from more of a work in progress line, and some of them are still like just kind of a line that occasionally throws like, shy rats. So my thing is, I selectively pick out by 8 weeks or around 8 weeks which rats tend to be the best in my hand, which ones are more likely to calm down and behave well. And then from there, the ones that are too wiggly or too much for my liking anyway, that I feel like there couldn't be any progress on them, are the ones I will readily cull. Because at that point,
personally,
they're rats who just wouldn't really go out and make good pets for families,
Right.
Yeah. How do you cull rats? Should we put like a warning?
We can add that. I can add it in like kind of post or something. Okay. But anyway, so culling is like you have technically 3 ways. However, 2 ways are more reliable, and the third way that I'm going to mention is so even the American Veterinary Association, Vet Med Association, has agreed that it's not actually a reliable way to cull. So, but first we'll address the two primary ones. You have cervical dislocation, which should be done on rats under 250 grams in size. And cervical dislocation is as it sounds. You basically dislocate the cervical vertebrae from the skull, and it just basically snapped the neck, effectively speaking.
Yeah.
You're taking away that and then the body just shuts down. And
Yep.
now the scary part about SD is, of course, the is the fact that
CD.
they'll
CD.
still
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
CD.
Yeah, sorry, CD. So the scary part about CD for some is that technically it's the nerves will still fire off, so the animal still may move even though it's already technically dead.
Yeah.
It
so
can
it's one of those
also
things
be
where-
a little bit more difficult to, unless you've done it before, to,
Yeah. CD and animal.
yeah,
Yeah, so
I will be
yeah.
completely honest about that.
CD is one of those things where it's a situation in which you have to do it really carefully, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So that's my big thing is a lot of people have this problem where they CD but they don't do it right. And the same
Yeah.
applies to the next form of culling rats, which actually is known as, of course, CO2 euthanasia.
Mhm.
So what you do is you create a sealed bin or tub, and this is better for a more peaceful, gentle death. The animals go into that sealed up tub, and you have a hose connected to a CO2 tank. Now, the tough part about this, too, is similar to CD, you have to be careful about how you regulate the CO2 flow, because that also can do more harm than good if not done right.
Yeah.
Right.
But, when it comes to the CO2 euthanasia, I find that it's a lot more gentle. The animal is generally going to be less stressed, especially if they're used to going in and out of bins for cleaning and stuff related, purposes.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yep, so at that point they're already used to that kind of thing, and then next thing they know, they're just taking a nap forever. And
Yeah.
so that's another way to call it. It tends to be the more popular one because also it's something just much easier to do as well, because you can just put in a whole amount of rats, and then you're not going one by one,
Yeah.
But then the final way, and this is only for rats that are under 10 days old, but technically, again, the American Veterinary Medical Association, or whatever it's called, they do not actually fully condone this, as there is no conclusive evidence that it's indeed humane, or a humane method of culling, is
Right.
putting the babies in the freezer. And freezing them to death.
Yeah,
So
I've heard that one.
the suggestion is that the nerve endings don't exist yet, which, to be fair, yes, rats do come out completely, very little development. So
Yeah.
I would say rats and mice babies, because they have such litters, come out
Yeah.
very underdeveloped and very premature.
yeah, so
Um,
it's definitely one of those things where it has some merit, but at the same time, again, I want to really reiterate is that there's no conclusive evidence, so just take this with a grain of salt is the big thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of backyard breeders will not, especially in the rodent and hobby,
Yeah.
will send out animals that are not fit for human interactions. They can be very skitty, they might be
Yep.
very bitey, and that's the
Yeah.
reason right now that I have 2 of my lines I would willingly send out animals
Right.
out of, and they're very well established lines, but I am not comfortable enough with all of my animals at
Right.
this point to send out at all. So
Exactly.
if somebody's like, I just need a female to keep another female company,
Yep.
and I'm
Then
like,
no.
if you're okay with
Yeah.
a slightly skittish animal, I've got my snow tiger line is absolutely wonderful temperamental wise,
Yep.
as is the Merle line that I've been working on. And I would even say maybe my satin line is also decent and solid enough that I wouldn't have any issue sending out from that line.
Yep.
But I wouldn't send out in general. I reach into my snow tiger
Yep.
bin, and my male is up my hand, and he's like, "Stop! I am here!" And I'm
Yep.
like, "Sir, you gotta calm down, please."
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's the big separation is the ethical breeders in the rat world breed for that temperament, but they also want the health, and they also want the animal to represent best what they are. So, for example, Russian blue, you would want it to look like a Russian blue and not an American blue or something like that, or
Right.
anything like
Yeah.
that. So, when it comes to rats and mice too, especially, is focus the ethical breeder focus should be primarily on the health, temperament, and then the color comes later. However, the nice thing
Yeah.
about rats and mice is you can still technically breed for color without absolutely sacrificing health and temperament like you can in
Oh,
dogs.
definitely. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm constantly, as a breeder, I've got a tub right now of probably about 20 females that I'm growing out to switch out from my older breeding females to some of
Right.
these younger females. And I'm in there, I'm doing stuff with them.
Yep.
And I'll be honest, these are grow out females. These are females that I would like to keep in my program.
Yeah.
But if I've got a female who, like, she's the last one I can catch in the tub and she's running from me and stuff, she also goes to freezer camp because, well, like I said, I do CO2.
Right.
Yeah.
Because her temperament can actually affect the temperament of her cage mates.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, by being very selective with my temperaments, being aggressive in my breeding program.
Exactly, and making sure to really call when there's even the slightest thing off is such an important thing. Where a lot of the backyard breeders in the rodent world will basically, any temperamental issues, they'll usually either blame on the buyer, they'll blame on an external factor, et cetera, and they'll, the big thing is in the rodent world, it's narcissism runs strong in a lot of the backyard breeders. And
Oh, yeah,
the unfortunate
definitely.
part is there's a lot of backyard breeders is the issue.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Big time.
yeah, and so you could actually translate that somewhat into the rabbit world too, where you also have the separation between people who, of course, are meat and pet, and then you just have the meat only and then the pet only. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
problems between that and conflicts. But for the most part, you should have a similar kind of mindset when it comes to rabbits as well. However, in rabbits, you're going to want to see more in terms of the focus being on the animal's structure, like you would see in dogs, because you obviously want that animal to be functional. And
Yeah.
Right.
by being functional, you'll want it to conform to the breed's standard structure ideal, if possible, or at least close enough to it.
Yeah. And I come from a looser world of axolotls
Right,
for breeding purposes,
Yeah,
so it's like
speaking of, what was
What
that
is
like,
similar,
actually?
but
Yeah,
I'm
what was
curious.
what was that like? Like,
Yeah.
So I focused mainly on I forget what they were called. They were wilds, but they had high iridophores. I forgot the name. It's like star something. Starburst. It was Starburst.
okay, so it was kind of the sparkly ones, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or like I also had goldens or coppers with high iridophores. I just like the
Okay.
sparkly a lot, but like
Who doesn't
you don't
like
have to worry
sparkly?
about temperament. They're all about the same. Like I've never heard of an aggressive axolotl.
Yeah, right. Imagine an
Ever.
axolotl leaping out and like biting your neck to kill you.
Yeah, no.
Right.
Like, all of them, if you wiggle your finger, are going to think, "Oh, food."
Right, something tasty.
I mean, they'll literally look at a stationary rock and think, "Oh, food."
Right.
So,
So,
but like if I had an unintentional
Yeah.
female lay 1,000 eggs and
Yeah.
I couldn't like sell them or whatever, like they're in the egg. You can microwave them.
Oh, okay. That's interesting to
There's
know through that.
microwaving or freezing.
Yeah, okay. Because I was gonna say there's whether or not there's freezing as well. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's,
And then
I assume it's similar to like how snail eggs happen in a way where you
yeah,
just do
I mean
basically whatever with them almost anyway.
yeah, it's not like reptile eggs.
Right.
It's a little different, but
yeah, and even then, reptile eggs they start off no different than chicken eggs. Like there's literally just like
yeah,
a small smidge where the vein comes from, but you can
yeah,
literally crack open a snake egg and eat it for all or boil it in
yeah.
water. Either. So I don't know, but
Yeah, it's an axolotl, but
yeah, right.
So I guess my question is, we're talking about like what we look for in, our breeding operations with rodents. Like, is there like, if you notice, like, say a female male pairing was throwing a lot of like, I don't know, maybe like
Deformities or
missing,
something.
yeah, would you continue to breed that pairing, or would that be a pairing that, like, as an ethical breeder, you would be like, no more?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would find like a pet only home for like
Okay.
the two.
Yeah.
So you
Gotcha.
would soft call
I
them out of the program. You wouldn't
Yeah.
hard
yeah.
call, but you would, like, definitely retire
Yeah.
them from an active breeding program.
Yeah, because it's a lot easier in a sense to do pet only homes.
Right.
Right.
And if I note, I never personally had an issue with any deformities or anything.
Right.
I kept in touch with anybody I sold eggs to. Mostly like it's very interesting to see what you get because you can't always like you can't tell when they're just an egg.
Right. True.
So you would sell the actual eggs. You wouldn't even, like, grow them up into adults. You would sell the eggs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh,
Yeah, you
okay.
literally just mail the eggs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because
Would
like
you, like-
I've heard of that happening, but I've definitely never really seen a lot. From what I've looked up, but like, yeah, I've heard of that happening. So that's interesting to know that you can just definitely do that safely.
Yeah. I think at one point I forgot what the special ones were.
Mm-hmm.
They're not lucky like in Pal World. But the ones that are like the gene is oddly split.
The fireflies, where they, like...
No.
Is it the one where they
no.
take the tail? Oh, no?
No.
Yeah, which speaking
'Cause
of,
that,
I guess
like-
after this, what do you think of fireflies? But yeah.
Personally, I don't have enough research to say one way or the other.
Yep.
But as far as I read, I think it's done in the embryo.
Yep.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't imagine that they feel anything from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I personally don't have an issue with it, and I feel like it's interesting as far as kind of messing with genes go for research purposes, because
Right.
axolotls can't get cancer,
Right.
you know, and they
Right.
regenerate. So
Yep.
I don't see an issue with it.
Mhm.
I still can't remember the
Is it
the word for
chimerism?
the yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mhm.
I ended up with somebody getting that from one of my eggs, and that was kind of interesting. Oh, I guess so. The equivalent would be morphine, because axolotls aren't like 100% axolotls anymore. They're mixed with the tiger salamander.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
and sometimes
So-
they'll actually, like, crawl, like, sometimes they will,
Yeah,
like,
they will
I guess,
morph.
evolve
Right, yeah.
and
Yeah.
become,
Yep.
like, a semi-aquatic species, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard of that, okay,
They'll
yep.
become salamanders.
Okay.
So that's something that you do not want in your axolotls. You don't want to see that happening. I had that happen once
Yep.
with literally 1 out of like 1,000.
Okay.
Really,
So-
wow.
I believe I still took her out of the program because she was throwing a lot of wilds,
Okay.
I think. But that would be a good equivalent.
Okay.
Yep.
And so I would always, I would take them out of the program and find a home for them.
Okay.
But if you could get dwarfism
Oh, okay.
Okay.
in axolotls,
Huh.
and
Did not know that.
the issue with that is they're not healthy. So you can
Right.
find like a pet-only
Gotcha.
home for them. I never had that as an issue. I never experienced that happening with any of my lines, but
Okay.
personally, if I had and I noticed it very early on, I would have called them because
Yeah.
I don't think like a lot of people think it's cute and want them, but like
Right.
I don't think it's a very good like condition
Yeah.
Right.
in axolotls. I think what I read about it, which I'm not sure is true or not, so don't quote me on that, but
Right.
that their internal organs keep growing, but their body stops growing.
Oh, yeah.
So like it's kind of like a goldfish that's like stunted, you know,
right.
when they
you
don't
let
have
the
a
goldfish
large
in a
enough.
bowl,
Yeah.
And then they, like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is actually interesting with when you mentioned dwarfism, because something interesting we found in rats so far is dwarf rats
tend to live longer
Yeah, they
and be
have a tendency to
healthier.
live longer and
Oh,
have a higher
interesting.
resistance to, I think it was cancer or something else. I forget what
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
specifically, but I thought it might have been some type of cancer or cancers, but I would have to double check on it. But it's like I found that quite interesting, knowing that is that dwarf
Yeah.
rats can apparently live longer than the standard sized ones, but you
That's
know,
interesting.
yeah. Although back on axolotls, so something also I'm curious about. What is your stance on, or thought process on mosaic axolotls? I guess because like I came
That's
across
the
this.
one I was thinking
Oh, okay.
of.
Because I came across this TikTok
Okay.
once talking about them, and like it was a bit confusing. So like I was just kind of sitting there like, huh. But it's like I was like mosaic though, and like now I'm gonna ask you, what's your stance on those, or what do you, if you know anything or whatnot?
I mean, that's just kind of like the chimeraism.
Okay,
Like,
gotcha.
there's mosaics and then there's split mosaics.
Okay,
So, I mean, like it's basically, I know there's a difference between that and like chimera,
gotcha.
but I'm not sure about it.
Yeah,
But it's pretty
okay.
much just uh like a rare chance that happens. But
Yeah.
as far as I know, there's no health concerns linked to it.
Okay. Yeah, because like I remember, there was like some whole like drama thing about them, like on that like TikTok I saw, so I was like wondering about it. But yeah, okay, that's interesting to know then.
I know that fireflies tend to be like a hotly debated thing
Oh,
because
yeah.
Yeah,
it,
absolutely.
They
it's
are.
got to be done in a lab and
Yeah.
blah 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 blah, right? And
Yeah.
it's
And they sell for thousands.
right.
Jeez, yeah.
But I guess my thought process on that is that there are certain creatures like octopus, axolotls will regrow like
Yep.
missing gills and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That we can learn a lot from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm not going to really touch on that anymore because I know that's animal testing is a hotly debated subject that we'll have to
Yeah.
We'll
dive
have to
into
save
on
that one
a
for an entirely different
I'm not
episode.
researched on that.
Yeah. but-
right.
Yeah. So, let's see. We've gone
But-
over. Yeah. So overall, we've gone over rodents. We touched on axolotls a bit. I guess reptiles is another big one. So let's go over that. I guess after
Yeah.
what you were going for, Rory.
Yeah, but on the whole chimera thing with
Okay.
the axolotls and the mosaics,
Yeah.
there's actually breeds of horses that chimerism is very prevalent in.
Okay.
And it's actually Icelandic horses tend to
Oh.
have the highest
Oh.
level of chimerism in the horse genetic world.
Okay, and is this like something harmful to the horses, or is it just kind of there? Like
It's just kind of there.
interesting.
So horses can have just like in reptiles, we call them paradoxes.
Gotcha.
So a paradox is usually a somatic mutation.
Okay.
Horses can have somatic mutations. Chimerism is, when two embryos actually end up fusing into one, and it can come out like it's so cool that you can come out with like some really weird and unique patterns from that. Like
Okay.
literally like one half of the horse's face might be bay while the other half is black. And it's just
Interesting.
some really
Gotcha.
interesting color morphs, and sometimes they can have like fertility issues because it
Right.
depending on the embryo, but it is actually one of those things that is very cool. And
Yeah.
I know that in some of the horses they will, especially if it happens in like a mare or a stallion, they will
Okay.
breed it out and try and figure out what's going on there, and they'll be like,
Oh,
it's a
gotcha.
somatic mutation. So
Okay.
I guess just like in, but usually that will come with a testing, like a genetic testing for colors and stuff like that, and
Right.
usually you can figure out if it is a genuine program or something like that,
Okay.
if it is chimerism or a somatic mutation by the genetic testing, because they will test for genetic colors.
Okay. Yeah.
So Once again, a little bit of backyard breeding, mixing with an ethical breeder there. So
Right.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like that weird balance sometimes too.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting though. But I feel like horses actually would be a really fun one for a future episode as well. So we'll definitely put that on the back
Yeah.
burner for a future because like
definitely.
I know there's like a lot to horses, so I'd definitely like to hear you talk about that.
Oh, I would love
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. So we'll definitely hit that one up another episode for sure.
Excellent.
On to reptiles though. So yeah, so my big thing is we definitely have a lot of issues with people who are like backyard breeding and unethically breeding reptiles hardcore. Far more than we see ethical breeding of them, if I'm being honest. And my big problem too is we have a lot of people who also breed the wrong reptiles for the wrong people and just sell to anyone pretty much who
Yeah,
has the
I
money.
know. What? They're not tegus. They're savanna monitors.
Oh yeah. Oh right. Yeah.
I saw that a lot.
Yeah, and they only sell for like what, like $50 to $100 average. So it's like they're
Yeah.
extremely easy to get, but they're really not a good like beginner
They're
pet. They're a much more
not.
advanced animal.
Yeah,
So,
and they can get very aggressive.
Yeah. Yep.
So I know Tick is pretty established in the reptile world. I am not. What are
Me
some
neither.
things that you, as a reptile person, would look for in a ethical breeder versus a backyard breeder?
That is definitely a good point. So now I will say, obviously, my standards of reptile keeping have definitely improved, while also still having some level of neutrality in the some questionable things.
Right.
So my big thing is, in a breeder sense, not all breeders who use racks are bad, but you also have to understand that there are many who definitely don't do it right.
Right.
When you're looking
Yeah.
at a breeder, if they're going to use racks, I would highly suggest you look at a breeder who focuses on using a well set up rack, which is much larger than what the animal technically quote unquote needs for its bare
Okay.
minimal in terms of tub size. I would look for a breeder who adds enrichment to their tubs, ideally, because we've reached a point where now reptiles, most of them anyway, or at least with snakes, there are obviously more advanced reptiles that definitely have a higher capacity and stuff. In terms of snakes, though, they're highly intelligent, but also they're at the point where they haven't developed the need for the same level of enrichment as like a dog or a cat. But you should still add a little something like some nice foliage, a few different caves, maybe a small, those like little holy balls they have for dogs. Add one
Yeah.
of those in for an appropriately sized snake to crawl around and play in, basically, or not really play, but just crawl around in.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, I feel like that's what you should aim for when you're looking for an ethical breeder of a reptile is someone who cares about the well-being of their animals.
And would you say that well-being isn't limited to just like physical well-being, but like intelligent and emotional well-being?
Yeah, definitely. If you have
Okay.
if you have someone who's meeting also some mental needs of an animal too, I feel like that's especially a good one. But it's not to say that people who are doing like now I don't think you should go for like the extremely bare minimum of like they're just on newspaper or the water dish. But if someone has
Right.
like a substrate
Yeah.
and like just some foliage in a cave in there for that, but no like major enrichment, I also think that's okay too, as long as you're
Right.
also still doing some making sure the animals they're breeding are being bred from animals who are healthy eaters and overall curious active animals.
Okay.
Because there's no conclusive evidence so far, but we have seemingly found some anecdotal evidence that an animal's appetite may be tied to its parents' levels of like feeding response.
So a good eater might produce good eaters.
Is more likely to produce good eaters.
Yeah.
Especially when you keep the animals under the correct circumstances or correct conditions.
Okay.
Yep, and overall, another thing too is like it also obviously depends on the species. So, for example, if I were to go to let's say a dart frog breeder, right?
Right.
I would not want to pick a breeder who does not have a bioactive setup for their dart frogs, if I'm being
Okay.
entirely honest. Just because a dart frog can breed in a non-bioactive setup does not mean it's the proper setup for them, though. It just
Would you
means
say
it's
that-
just enough to breed,
Right. It's meeting the bare minimum.
like just enough requirements to encourage them to breed enough that they, there can be profit involved.
So now, talking about bioactive, I'm trying to figure out. I've seen a massive movement in the not the reptile, but the rodent world for bioactive setups for breeding mice and rats.
Oh,
What
yeah, I've
is
heard
your
Oh.
opinion?
So yeah, so here's the thing: is like I think it's a cool idea. However, there's a lot of maintenance involved even when you have it fully set up. I noticed in the rat groups, for example, or rat side of things, you actually have to turn the soil a lot, and you can often have like various mites develop too. My
Right.
big thing with bioactive and rodents is you have to understand that it can at least reduce the amount of work you need to do, but it's not going to entirely get destroy the amount of work you need to do.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I would definitely say that the bio load of rodents in general is not conducive to, um, especially the bigger rodents. It's not conducive to keeping on bioactive.
Exactly, especially when you consider that the space necessary for bioactive for a slow for an animal with like a very low functioning system like a reptile would have is much different than in a rodent, which not only would they have a much higher active like body system, but they would produce a lot of bio waste, and then not only that, but generally the territory of those animals would be significantly higher per single animal than in say a reptile, where like
Right.
for example, a leopard gecko, you could easily put in a 40-gallon bioactive and effectively be set for life.
Yeah.
For the life of that leopard gecko. And honestly, you probably wouldn't even have to clean at all, just about, except for like wiping off the sides of the tank or something. But a rat,
Yeah.
however, if you were going to go full bioactive for a rat and expect to go in where never having to clean, you probably would need to dedicate an entire like wall of a room to just two rats because of the amount of bio load that rats can create. Is my
Yeah.
thing, and I'm it's not saying this to be like overly dramatic, but I feel like that's effectively just like a general idea of what you would want to expect if you were to match the level of bioload that those rats would create versus making a ecosystem which would properly clean up after those rats and keep up with that cleaning of the rats.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
And it's like, and also it's a bit subjective based on like room size, obviously, but for the most part, just like a standard size, like I guess bedroom, then you would want to probably have an entire wall for that, just because again, rats can create such a massive, unbelievably huge bioload that a just your average 40-gallon like a leopard gecko might do well in would not keep up at all. So that's definitely
Yeah.
when I
That's an interesting
yeah.
subject. I haven't heard anything about bioactives for rats.
Right, yeah. But otherwise, but and then back on the reptile thing is like, so obviously, like, and I'm not saying like, every reptile has to have bioactive, but if it's a situation where they're breeding a certain species like dart frogs in a bioactive, you're definitely going to be better off getting from that breeder than not, because realistically, dart frogs, for example, are definitely a species which have expressed they thrive at their best in a bioactive, and that's what we as keepers should strive for when trying to
Yeah.
breed our
Right.
animals and give them the best life. And not only that, but I think one other major thing is you're gonna have a separation between people. You're gonna have the ones who believe UVB is completely unnecessary for certain animals.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
gonna have the ones who believe UVB is optional for certain animals, which I'm in that party, and I'll explain why in a bit. Then you're gonna have the ones who believe UVB is completely necessary for every single animal they come across. The reason I'm in the middle party there is because technically UVB is not actually genuinely necessary for some species. Some species it
Yeah.
absolutely is, obviously, like bearded dragons. But say
Yeah.
crested geckos, which I have, UVB is actually known to be harmful to them if you're not doing it right. You need a very
Yeah.
low setting UVB bulb and everything. And even then, there's actually been no proper evidence suggesting that crested geckos do better with or without UVB. It's more based on the proper diet you give them. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things where
That makes sense.
I believe that if you're going to go to someone and they breed reptiles and they have like a UVB opinion, I would focus on someone who's more in the middle of understanding that not every reptile needs it, but they also have the understanding that reptiles can benefit from it if they do it right.
Yeah.
Which is again what I believe personally is like Like, if I had the option, I would absolutely give all my reptiles the option to have UVB lighting, just because I know that some of them can benefit off it. But if there's some animals I have that, are starting to actually show signs of stress or disturbance from UVB, and in the case of crested geckos, you can actually burn their eyeballs from it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so my California king is albino, and he freaks out whenever I have a light anywhere near him, so...
Okay. Yeah, so you just mostly gotta focus on using, letting the natural light from outside filter. Yeah, right. So, yeah, that's my big thing, is like, I'm all for giving your reptiles the best, but make sure that the best is actually for them and not just for you, the human. And that's one of the best things you can look for in a breeder for any animal, in my opinion, is the human is not forcing their ideals upon that animal. But they still try to do for the best for their animals.
Yeah. So, like, do your own research.
Right.
And
just,
like,
and
go by what you have.
Too.
Yeah. A good mixture of research from many sources.
Absolutely.
And I definitely think that, how do I want to phrase this without being an ass? That part of being a good, ethical hobby breeder, or in this case, not a backyard breeder, is that you can take criticism, and you can take constructive criticism and change for the better to make your program ethical and better for whatever you are breeding.
Yeah.
Right, and that's definitely true, is like the willingness to evolve as a person is really important, for sure.
Yeah. Like, no matter how long you've been in the breeding hobby, or like in general,
as I always say,
you can always learn.
Yeah, years and amount of animals you work with means nothing, because you could still have been doing it wrong all those years and with all those animals.
Yeah. Right, and I think that a good breeder, an ethical breeder, be they a hobby or like an actual breeder, is the ability to go, I learned this bit of science, I didn't know it, I need to be providing X, Y, and Z, and I've only been providing X and Y, and so I will be providing Z going forward.
Absolutely.
And, committing to making that change. Just because you say you're going to make the change doesn't mean crap until you actually commit to the change.
Do it. Kind of like how I, mentioned UVB in reptiles. It's initially we thought that all we needed was just powder to supplement it, but now we know that some reptiles do indeed do well with providing UVB if it, in optional situations, and if keeper, even if they don't ever use it for all their animals, as long as they are willing to admit that, actually, UVB can be beneficial, I will provide it to certain animals just to see how it goes, then that's more than enough for me. It's one of those things where you could be working with the fucking dogs for 40 years, but you could have been doing it all wrong for 40 years entirely,
Yeah.
So
right. There's always room to grow.
Exactly. You never stop growing as a person, no matter where you are or who you are or anything like that.
And it's okay to make mistakes, you just have to learn from it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the big thing is owning up and learning from it.
Exactly, owning up. And, you'll have breeders that, will say, I didn't know X was a necessary test, had an issue arise, or, it was, what was it? It was a stud dog that started having seizures.
Okay.
After he was, 5. And his pup started having seizures, and she was like, I had no idea he's been neutered. It's the person I bought him from as a breeding prospect did not tell me that seizures were in his line.
Okay.
And so as soon as they were telling me his pups were having seizures and stuff, I offered to buy back, and I offered,
Okay.
I not so much buy back, but like exchange the pup, taken these pups that were having the seizures and had them neutered, and was like very open, and like she like reached out to people who had bought puppies from the stud dog and said, I can't guarantee this dog will not have seizures.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at least making everyone aware.
Right, and that's a key point of a good breeder,
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, though, we have definitely reached our time, so this will be
we have.
we definitely like to go, but we will have many episodes ahead of us. So
I am really excited. This was a lot of fun.
Right. This will hopefully be a fun project going forward, and I look forward to continuing to touch on various subjects within the animal community.
And I would like to reach out to the animal community and give us some suggestions that you would like us to cover and touch on.
Exactly.
Like, give us topics that you feel like you really want to have highlighted or that you feel is important, and we would be happy to find a time to touch on it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
This isn't just for us to sit here and gab for 30 minutes.
This
we want to educate and we want to learn ourselves. So please feel free to communicate with us, talk with us.
I love researching things.
Right, we're always open for learning.
Yep.
So.
All right, and that being said, we shall see you everyone in the next one. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.